The Valyrian Empire was destroyed by the Doom, an event that was so destructive that it really only rivals me needing validation after a few shots at the club. Here's looking at you, Suntrap. But before Valyria lost all its self-respect in a haze of smoke and flashing lights, what was it like? What was the Valyrian Empire, or more accurately, the Valyrian Freehold, like? How did it function? Were people happy there? Who was in charge? Let's talk about Valyria a little bit. Now, as I've talked about before, George loves to pull from real-world counterparts for a lot of his locations in his universe. If you look at most of Westeros and Essos, you can look at each of the areas and normally find like a real-world counterpart somewhere. And so Valyria is really no different because Valyria is George's stand-in for Rome. Now, we see this in a number of ways. The Valyrians were known for being technologically advanced for their time period and in relation to the, things around them, and they used those technological advancements to subjugate the people around them. Not unlike the Romans. And also not unlike the Romans, Valyria was a place of contradictions because of that. Because, there was all of this progress being made. There were all of these very interesting kind of movements happening. Valyria was known for being like a very religiously free place, for example. But at the same time, while there are a lot of these freedoms, there isn't anything like a king. Everyone is a citizen. You also have the inverse of that, where slavery is a big part of Valyria, its economy, how it functions, why they are colonizing all these areas, because they are trying to basically import more slaves. And so there's a wild contradiction there, because yeah, you are advanced, you are developed, and you're like free thinking in a lot of ways, but then in some very, very big ways, you are let's generously call you antiquated. Less generously, you're fucking monsters. But let's break down some of those elements I just talked about, as well as just the general history of Valyria. So, as you can see in the little map here, Valyria is actually a city. So it is the capital city of the Valyrian Freehold. So a freehold, kind of like Rome, is basically like, I don't want to say a democracy, but like if you are a citizen, you have rights. And in theory, all of the citizens have equal rights to each other. But even then, I'm getting ahead of myself. So here is where Valyria is, the center of the Valyrian Freehold, in the basically Valyrian Peninsula. Also known as the Lands of the Long Summer. This is an area where, unlike the Lands of Always Winter, it's basically always summer here, or at least the summers are long. Wherever Essos kind of is situated on this planet, it seems like the lower or the southern part of Essos, and then the northern part of Sithorios, are probably near the equator because of how warm they are. So this area was considered very good. So Valyria was centered basically like in a valley surrounded by the 14 flames. These are volcanoes. They are large volcanoes that basically ringed this peninsula and made for very fertile ground. Like, if anyone is of the sciencey persuasion, I'm not very much myself, but that volcanic soil is very good to grow in. And so you have this area where it is always summer, the soil is great to plant in, and so naturally people are going to congregate there, and a civilization is going to spring up. Now, of course, what makes them special is the Valyrians somehow found a way to tame dragons. They were able to tame dragons and then use them as a way of growing their little empire or freehold. Now, the beginning of this relationship isn't exactly known. It isn't known how they tamed the dragons, and their explanation seems very, mythic in nature. The Valyrians claim that they are literally descendant from the dragons, and that is why they call themselves Blood of the Dragon, because they come from them, and then the current dragons are literally their kin. And so that's why the Valyrians are the most specialist boys and girls that ever did exist. Yay, blood purity, woo! But of course, we aren't exactly certain if that is really what happened, because there are conflicting reports on the origins of dragons, because the Valyrians would have you think that, dragons come from these lands, they learn to tame them, and, whoop-de-doo, we're the specialist. But there are theories that dragons originated in other places, or even all over the planet, because there are histories, or, I should say not histories, myths of dragons originally only being tamed over in Ashai. And then, like, whoever those group of people were teaching the Valyrians. And that's how the Valyrians actually learned. It wasn't like their own specialness, really. Also, dragon bones have been found all over the planet, from Westeros to all over Essos, so it's hard to know like exactly what happened or whatever. Now, seemingly in relation to the fact that their empire and strength was coming from, these dragons, these almost quasi-weapons that they were able to tame, it makes sense that at that point, it's very hard for, like, a monarchical system to develop, because, okay, I want to be the king. I have a dragon, so I can enforce that, but, all these other dragons exist with these other people, so who's to say that, like, another one with a slightly bigger dragon couldn't come and take me out? So I assume, as a way of not self-destructing, they established the idea of a freehold, and that is, if you are a land-owning citizen who has not been born into slavery, then you have equal rights to another land-owning citizen who has not been born into slavery. If you don't own land and you are born into slavery, you are well and truly fucked. But, the Valyrians didn't really care, because that's how they do sometimes. Now, again, this is more of in concept than rather in practice, because you have to remember that on top of that, the main source of power were the dragons, and the dragons were limited to the 40 families who were the dragon riders. So you could be a freeholder, like a citizen of the Valyrian freehold, and have equal rights to everyone else, but that didn't necessarily mean that you were a member of one of the dragon riding families. And so naturally, those families tended to be the more powerful ones and tended to have a bit more sway than the system would suggest. So despite the fact that there is an actual, like, citizenry, unlike a lot of the other places during the span of this empire, there is still very much a class system in effect. Which is why the Valyrian practice of the schmincest and intermarriage within the family starts taking place, because they are trying to concentrate their power, to concentrate their privileges amongst themselves, because the more you dilute that, when everyone has dragons, then you don't have as much power. It's the same logic that I used earlier for why there isn't a king, because there are just too many of them to be able to, fully subjugate the others. But at this point, we've settled on, okay, well, we are the 40 families who are the most powerful, but that's the limit. That's it. The cutoff is here. We don't want anyone to, like, dilute our power, and I am comfortable having this much with, you other 39 families, as long as I don't lose any more. But from what we know of the histories, even that didn't exactly work out, because the families were always scheming against each other. One of the theories for why the Doom of Valyria took place is that the 14 Flames were basically the source of a lot of magic. The Valyrians practiced blood and fire magic, and because they were doing lots of assassinating with each of the families, the idea is that they basically took out one too many of the blood mages that were keeping the, like, unstable magical volcanoes in check, and then it went kablooey. And the fact that they were unstable, I think, does make a lot of sense, because one of the big things with the Valyrian Empire, especially with their practice of slavery, was they were trying to pull in slaves to work the mines of these volcanoes. Because these volcanoes were rich in so many natural resources, they were basically importing people to get it out for them so that they could, expand their wealth. Which is why it's also the general belief that the Faceless Men originated in the minds of the 14 Flames, because these were people with nothing in life. They had nothing at this point. They were slaves. They were going to die in this place, mining, hoping that they didn't get killed with lava or fireworms or whatever. And then the Faceless Men developed as a way of granting the gift of death, to these people who wanted release from this. I'll say I really like the idea of the Faceless Men and the doom being caused by the assassinations of all these blood mages, because I think it speaks to the issue of Valyria, which is its own hubris. Despite having positive aspects of its society with its technological advancement, its freedom of religion, etc., it abuses its privilege. It abuses people in order to satisfy this growing greed that they can't satiate. And so regardless of all of their power, all of their influence, everything, it all gets brought down because they fuck up. If they could have just been satisfied with their lot in life, if they didn't destabilize these volcanoes to the point where they're going to explode, if they didn't enslave all these people, torturing them until entire order around death, evolves, possibly also helping in their destruction, they might have survived, but they don't. Okay.